Thank you.
The first question I have, how did you get to know about Medical Science Liaison?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, the career and the profession and the role is elusive. And I think a lot of people describe it, and I still probably would to this day, it's one of the best kept secrets in the pharmaceutical industry. So my role or my path to our role, I guess, and my journey was really rooted in my scientific background. So some may know that I recently went back to medical school and graduated after 31 years of absence. But prior to that 31 years ago, I really thought, I'd stay in clinical medicine and kind of do the traditional route, and had to leave medical school due to some family tragedy and some other issues. And so decided to pursue another career. And I was actually in academia at the time, teaching at a medical college, and just thinking about other opportunities. And strangely, and this is going to age me a bit, but I actually saw an advertisement in a newspaper. Now, some people who are listening might not even know what a newspaper is, but those things did exist. So that was 24 years ago, in the year 2000. I saw this advertisement in a newspaper for something called Medical Science Liaisons. And that was really the first time I'd ever even heard of the role. And so I started trying to investigate. And of course, this was really at the beginning of even the internet. So there was very little resources. Of course, there was no society. There was no resources out there to help educate you on this. And so I really started just kind of trying to better understand and focus on understanding what the role is and the requirements and so on and so forth. So I did some crazy things, right? One of those things that I love to tell people, and I think some actually don't believe it's true, but these are true stories. This is exactly what I did. I actually went around in the area that I lived, and I went door to door of physicians' offices telling them, here's what I want to do. I want to sit in your lobby. I want to wait for people who are coming in from the pharmaceutical industry. And when they come in, I want you to let me know, and I would like to talk to them and learn about the role. And a lot of the offices were, and I explained, of course, that I went to medical school. So there was a little bit of parity, a little bit of a connection with the physician. But some of the offices were like, you want to do what? You want to sit in our office and wait for these people to come in. But that's exactly what I did. And so I did that for quite a while, right? Probably for a good solid month and a half, 2 months. And I got a stack of business cards. Now, at that point, I could not differentiate, and I did not know the difference between a sales rep and a medical science liaison. So for me, all I saw was a bunch of people with fancy suits coming in and talking to the physician, right?
Yeah.
So the staff really took it upon themselves and were really, really nice and accommodating and trying to help me understand those roles and those differences. But that led ultimately to me befriending a local sales rep with a company called Merck. And this guy actually introduced me to his manager. And of course, his manager was like, you are far beyond a sales rep, and based on what you're telling us you like to do, and so on and so forth, we really think you should pursue the MSL role. They introduced me to MSL leadership, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that's how I did it, pounding the pavement, getting over these sort of obstacles in your mind, and really starting to think about what do I need to do, and sometimes out of the box, to break into the MSL role. And so, of course, that was 24 years ago. Clearly it was not an easy path. And I certainly faced my share of objections and rejections on applications and so on and so forth. So I applied to several companies and I interviewed with a few, but Merck I was really, really fortunate to hook up with the manager, and that's how I broke in.
Good. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know somebody is hearing that, and also they're getting encouraged to go out there and take the step that they're supposed to take. Now that you're able to break in, taking that initiative, and every other person and also wondering how they can do that, how did you become passionate to help people to make the same step? When did you decide that you're going to help other people to do the same?
Yeah, look, the one thing that that people will say is, it's brutal breaking into the first MSL role. It's very tough. And if anyone ever tells someone otherwise, I always look at it as one of three things are happening. They're lying. They have no idea what they're talking about, trying to sell you something, or probably a combination of all three. And so one of the things that I think people will attest that know me well is I'm very direct in communication style, and certainly will be in this discussion. I do that because if I were somebody listening to this, I would want somebody to tell me good, bad, or indifferent, what do I need to do to break in, right? And so that's why I do it, is to try to help people. So where did it come from? Is my own obstacles. It's a challenge breaking in. So I faced my own sort of sets of challenges of breaking in. And really what that did was highlight the need of support and guidance. And, leading the MSL Society, the founding principle of our organization and really our community, and I think people will find this about the MSL community in general, is the founding principle of our organization is do the right thing and pay it forward. And so we were really about trying to help people. And that's the way I've approached things in my career. So it was really about facing my own challenges, but I also recognized that the impact of helping others and mentorship and sort of a structured training and materials can help people. So after, of course, I became a manager, and even before that as an MSL, as you alluded to, I've lived in 11 different countries. I've managed MSLs in 60. I've seen it done in a lot of ways. And that success has resulted in a lot of people reaching out constantly. How do you break in? And so I was doing this for years, just one-off, writing emails. And of course, it takes an enormous amount of time. Part of that is because the MSL role has grown exponentially over the last couple of years. There's more and more interest. There's more and more visibility of the role. So as a result, more and more people want to break in. And so what ended up happening is that is what culminated in me deciding to write a book. The first edition in 2013, and then last year, there you go. And then last year, I published a new edition of the book. And that was the reason for it, is to try to formalize that. And so my passion became that really as a result of those struggles. And I saw that helping people really could make an impact on their careers. And look, I would be misrepresenting myself if I didn't say that I don't freaking love it when people reach out to me and they say they used Resource in MSL Society, my book, or other things that we've done to help them. I love that. I never get tired of hearing it. But I always say to people, look, that's awesome, but now I've helped you, you help the next person. And so that's really big, and that's where it came from. And so that's really where it came from was the result of lots of people reaching out, and we wanted to formalize that process.
Good. Thank you so much, because it's impossible for you to help everybody, right? If everybody keep coming to you, you still have 24 hours in a day, right? So it's
look, I could right now, I could quit the MSL Society and do nothing but a full-time job of just writing and reviewing CVs. If I had $1 for every time someone reached out to me for that. So, but I can't, right, obviously. And so that's why, again, I wrote the book and, cover all those details in the book. to just try to help as many people as we possibly can.
Wow, interesting. It's good you mentioned something that you've been MSL in different countries across different companies. In your own opinion, what are the steps that you would recommend for somebody who is saying, well, now I want to explore this MSL role? What do they need to do step by step?
Yeah, look, I'm going to give you some very, as you know, Tulu, we know each other. I'm going to give you some very candid responses and information today. But I'm going to give you a couple of very biased answers as well. Here's one of them. I firmly believe the MSL role is the single greatest job. There is not a better job. There just isn't. If you are a science nerd, right? Like all of us are, right? If we have doctorate degrees in science, we're all science nerds, right? If you're a science nerd, there's no better job. There just isn't. But it's also obviously, you know, very, very competitive. And so what are some of those things? First and foremost, do you really understand what is an MSL? Like, what do they do? Do you really understand that? And so just for level set, let's talk about that first, just for everybody kind of thinking about, you know, what is an MSL? A couple of things first and foremost. The MSL role, because I mentioned the science nerd, but I want to clarify, the MSL role is not a scientific role. The MSL role is a communication role through science. That's really important to understand that differentiation, right? And so the MSL role is a communication role. And so what managers are looking for is your ability to communicate. And so when we think about what is the MSL, so the MSL role, the entire function, your entire purpose in life as an MSL is to add value to the KOLs that you support and engage with. And so we think about the primary function and the primary responsibility of an MSL is for you to be an unbiased medical resource to the physicians you support. Your function is to help KOLs make more informed clinical decisions. That's it. Everything else is white noise. Some of that white noise is important, things like SOPs and regulations and so on and so forth, of course. But it's really important as an aspiring MSL understands going in what an MSL is and what it is not. And so just having that basic understanding. So when I'm thinking about, hey, I'm going to apply for MSLs, well, first and foremost, do I understand what an MSL is? And so then educating yourself and then aligning yourself and your experience and background, which I think we're going to get into, your experience and background to that role. But first and foremost is that, but then also creating and developing a job search strategy. So things like identifying and understanding target companies, what your background and how your background aligns to those roles. But just really first and foremost is understanding that role and knowing how to communicate like an MSL. So I think those would be some real fundamental pieces. I know we're going to get into some additional details, but at the most basic core level, those would be some things that absolutely need to make sure that as an applicant that I'm fully aware of and understand.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much for being clear about that. It's very interesting that you say that. I was in a session yesterday and the facilitator was saying something about developing a pitch that has 5 words. Now, for the purpose of medical science liaison, you just said that helping clinicians, key opinion leaders to make better decisions such that the patients can become more treated and more healthy. In the case of somebody who is still thinking about the hindrance, which we know for sure is lack of experience. And that's why it's very difficult, because most jobs there want you to have the experience. What is the best way to tackle that lack of experience?
Yeah, look, this is a really important one, and so we think about this whole idea of how do I address this lack of experience, right? And so what kind of things that can I do to maybe even address that? Look, I think it's everything. So first and foremost, it's important to understand, and you read a lot of job descriptions and understand really, again, the role and where job descriptions come from, right? And so if you think about a really good sort of thing to think about is, what percentage of job descriptions ask for previous MSL experience or previous MSL experience preferred? I have no idea. I don't have any data on it, but just out of my 24 years of experience of both writing and reading them, I don't know, is it 99%? It's way up there, right? But it's important to understand where job descriptions come from, because that's going to be a stumbling block for a lot of applicants. Is I think, okay, do I have this experience and does it match up? And so it's really important to understand where job descriptions come from. Job descriptions come from people like me as a hiring manager, as a former hiring manager, I guess I should say now. When I was a hiring manager, I would get with HR and I'd write it out, right? I want A, B, C, D, E, so on and so forth. But it's also important to understand that job descriptions are written with the mentality that as I'm writing it, I'm saying to myself, bullet A, right? Or bullet number one. Ideally, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. The challenge is we don't live in an ideal world. So ideally, these are the things that I'm looking for, right? And so there are going to be job descriptions that are going to say, hey, we want that previous MSL experience. And I would tell an applicant or an aspiring MSL, if I meet all the other criteria and I feel like I'm a good match, absolutely apply anyway, right? And so what are some other things that I can do to address that? Well, first and foremost, I think when we think about job descriptions, if somebody wants to exponentially increase your chances of breaking into your first MSL role, only apply to roles in which you can absolutely position yourself as an expert in X, and X needs to match the job description, right? That is critical. And so when we think about, that's really important, because it's also important to understand that there's no such thing as a general MSL. All MSL roles are therapeutic area or disease state focused aligned. What does that mean? Therapeutic area. When I'm talking about therapeutic area, I'm talking about neurology, cardiovascular medicine, oncology, so on and so forth. We think about disease state within that. Let's go back to neurology. And so when we think about neurology, maybe we're talking about Parkinson's disease, right? So now I'm applying for a neurology, Parkinson's disease MSL, and I start seeing these bullets, right? And so when I'm applying for roles, if my background is cardiovascular medicine, you have no business applying for a Parkinson's disease MSL role. Why? Because I can guarantee you the chances of you breaking in successfully to that role are basically zero, right? So what can I do, right? So I would say, what can I do to enhance and really highlight my therapeutic area experience, right? So, or my lack of experience in general. I would be thinking about trying to scientific publications in that therapeutic area. So writing a bunch of cardiovascular publications is not going to help you with Parkinson's disease, right? So something like that. So thinking about peer-reviewed journals or presenting posters or giving presentations at conferences, that'd be one way. Somehow, some way, if you were working at some clinic and you got to be involved with a clinical trial, even a supporter in a trial, that'd be great. Obviously, highlighting any direct interaction with KOLs would be something else that you could address. Volunteering for projects that are MSL related. How would I know what is MSL related? The beautiful part of a job description will tell you exactly what that role is, right? And so what you're trying to do is match to those bullets. Creating scientific content. Maybe you are writing, I don't know, a blog or an article or publishing infographics, something like that. Something that really highlights that I am an expert in Parkinson's, right? Other things, I don't know, joining relevant groups, right? Maybe the National Parkinson's Disease Foundation or other things. So these would be some ways that you can further strengthen and highlight your experience. And most important here, I think the word is relevant experience. So substituting that, these are ways that you can strengthen your application.
Wow, excellent. That's very detailed. This is very good. This is very good. Thank you so much. One of the things that thank you. One of the things that I discovered in your book, reading through it, is the fact that the titles for medical science liaison is not the same across different companies. Can you give us an example of what those are? And also, what are the best ways to start applying? Well, if somebody's not thinking of applying, I know you just said focus on a therapeutic area. That's very basic. But then which strategy would you recommend for applying?
Yeah, absolutely. So you think about, let's talk about the titles first. So there are a lot of them. In fact, we actually did a big global survey on this. The MSL side conducted a survey on what are the most common titles used for the role today. You're going to see everything from regional medical director, medical manager, medical liaison instead of the science liaison. So you have MLs. You're going to see varying titles. What's interesting, though, is when we ask globally, what is the most common title used? And also a secondary question, what is the most appropriate title? In both of those cases, 75+%, both of those answers, it was medical science liaison. What's interesting, if you go on LinkedIn or, I don't know, Indeed or PharmaWeb or whatever, other job boards, and even on the MSL Society job board, you'll see companies will put something like medical manager, but then in parentheses, they'll put MSL, right? To ensure that, you know. But the thing is, if you start reading enough job descriptions, you're going to really understand, you're going to be able to start differentiating what that looks like and being able to differentiate, the different types of roles that are out there. And so I would tell you that to kind of be able to really understand that and really think about how I'm going to go about doing that. In terms of strategy, again, I think it's really about, certainly, you think about all of the steps. Well, first of all, I've got to be able to identify what are my therapeutic area or disease state focus. Then I got to start searching for roles and companies, and we call those target companies. So, like, for example, let's go back to the example of just to use Parkinson's. If my background is Parkinson's, then I'm going to start looking for companies that have Parkinson's disease products and Parkinson's disease MSL roles, right? So I'm going to identify target companies. Then, of course, I'm going to start looking for those jobs. I then would tell you, start thinking about networking. Networking is absolutely critical to your success as an MSL. In fact, we actually did a big global survey. We asked MSLs, was networking critical to your success in landing your current role? About 85% of MSLs, current MSLs, said that it was very important for them landing their current MSLs. We're not talking about aspiring MSLs, we're talking about current MSLs. So even for a current MSL, it's critical. So the networking piece comes in. But then there's some things I got to think about my strategy, right? And laying those pieces out. What are those? First of all, I've got to make sure that I have impeccable communication skills. Why? Because now they're going to be measured and evaluated. Everything from writing exploratory emails, my cover letter, and my CV, certainly during a phone screen, during a phone interview, during the in-person interviews. So both written and verbal communication skills. So I've also got to make sure that, going back to my CV, that it's well crafted, that it's appropriate for an MSL role. I will tell you what we look for on an MSL CV is different than, for example, just a standard scientific role. But then I also got to be thinking about what roles I'm applying for, being strategic around that, and then start preparing for the different steps of the process, the in-person or the phone screen, in-person, and phone interviews. And then the last piece, I would say, thinking about laying out my strategy, the area that most candidates fail in the MSL interview process is during the in-person interview, and that is the presentation. And so this presentation that, you know, generally all companies require MSLs to do is not the typical scientific presentation. And so people go into it blindly, not prepared, and they utterly fail. So I think laying out all of those pieces, being prepared for those, that would be my sort of approach, and be thinking about those, making sure I have those pieces in place.
Good, good. Thank you so much for that. Also, still talking about your book, Break Into Your First Role. It's mentioned that the application tracking software is also something that we need to be aware of. And that's why networking is also very important. That's why it's important to see how the aspiring MSL can build online presence and also network very well. What are your general advice on building online presence and also networking?
Yeah, look, I think building an online presence is again critical, right? And we think about you know, LinkedIn and other social media, writing blogs, as I mentioned. All of those pieces are critical, but it's also important to understand that you got to be thinking about branding and what I'm putting out. And so when, you know, you think about, I don't know, I'm hanging out at a bar and I had a beer with my buddies and we took a photo that may or may not be appropriate for general viewership. You got to be careful with stuff like that, because companies will do a thorough review, right, of your, you know, doing a background check, and that's part of it. We also know that, again, from a big global survey, I asked 185 managers, what was the social media, what was the source that they use primarily to evaluate applicants? LinkedIn was by far number one. So being careful what you put in and how you position yourself, how you brand yourself becomes really important. But using, you know, LinkedIn becomes really, really important. And, you know, how we do that also becomes really important. And so I would say that, you know, using LinkedIn strategically, right? So that means following MSLs and MSL leaders and joining relevant groups and engaging with content, which obviously means liking and commenting and sharing posts, so on and so forth, posting your own content. But that's the thing, posting what content? This is where I would say posting content that is relevant to your therapeutic area to further highlight your expertise in X. And of course, X matches the types of jobs you're applying for. So I think it's critically important. The problem is most aspiring MSLs do not know how to use LinkedIn appropriately, and they have no strategy. And so I think it really goes back to having a formal, well thought out strategic approach to using LinkedIn becomes really, really important.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much for saying that. And also to further build on that, one of the things that I've observed on LinkedIn is people using open to work status on their LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I've heard people have varying opinions on that. I would love to hear your opinion about somebody needing their next job and they have open to work. Is that effective way for the recruiters to see them, or it's not effective?
If you're asking me, if I give any credence to that whatsoever, I would tell you no. I don't think it's really that important. However, I'm also well aware that you think back to, the book and some of these things that we're talking about. And I always use this example. It's not like you need chapters 1, 3, and 5 to break in. You're going to need the whole book. You're going to have to do everything, right? You're going to have to be very well prepared. So if the open to network status will get you any more visibility, 100%, go do it, right? But I think what it really does is it could help signal that, your availability to recruiters. But I think, again, I wouldn't rely too much on it. I think it's just one piece of this big dynamic puzzle that we have to do. I think, you have to treat, again, LinkedIn as a platform to showcase your expertise, not just a digital resume. So again, it goes back to sharing insights, creating posts, that kind of thing. But I also think using, LinkedIn feature, like the featured section, right? That'd be another one to highlight achievements and publications, that kind of stuff. So I think it could be one of many tools that you could use to highlight to the community that you're open to networking and looking for your next opportunity.
Wow, good. Thank you so much. Open to networking and creating visibility. One of the things that I've also heard that is very important is to be able to identify hiring managers like you were in the past, recruiters, and also decision makers. So what is the best way to reach out to recruiters, hiring managers, and decision makers on LinkedIn? Yeah. And is there what are the people that you describe as decision makers in your book?
Yeah. So I mean, simple stuff. I just go on to LinkedIn and I type in things like MSL manager, Medical Science Liaison, all spelled out, manager, Medical Science Liaison Director, all spelled out in quotes, right? Or Director of Medical Affairs or Talent Acquisition Specialist. But I would be doing this not generally on LinkedIn. I would do another filter, and that would be to target companies, right? So maybe my target company is Merck. I'm not going in and looking at MSL, right? So I would be very, very narrowly focused, right? Very narrow focused. Then I would then start personalizing that outreach. So referencing, I don't know, specific posts or articles or company news. I would highlight things like a common connection, certainly, or some, I don't know, shared interest. We both went to WashU School of Medicine. I don't know, stuff like that. I would also then think about, think about trying to, and it's tough as an aspiring MSL, but what am I trying to do? I'm trying to build a relationship and not just make a connection, right? So what does that mean? I mean, I think really it talks about engaging these decision makers by commenting thoughtfully on their post, right? Sharing their post, making some thoughtful, respectful, approaches that way. And then certainly follow up with meaningful interactions. That would be another thing. Another thing that I think certainly aspiring MSLs can do is, and look, I think it's probably underutilized for aspiring MSLs, but every single aspiring MSL should be a professional level member of the MSL Society. Why? There's one beautiful resource. I mean, it's an amazing resource on the MSL Society that is not available anywhere else in the world. One feature, and that is the global directory has a feature on it that will certainly expedite this and make this much easier. And that is you can go in and narrow down and look for individuals based on therapeutic area or disease state. Imagine trying to do that on LinkedIn, right? So what that means is I can go in and look for, I don't know, all the managers that are in Parkinson's disease, right? Now that feature is only available for professional level members, but what that does is allows you to narrow down that focus and to be very concentrated again in that area. And so what would I do then? Then what I would do is I'd be writing a message to that manager. And the first line of my message would be something to the effect of, as a fellow member of the MSL Society, I'm reaching out because of X. What this does is it also makes that contact a little more warm. You probably have had it too, Tolu, that, when somebody reaches out to you on LinkedIn, I don't know this person. I don't know what they want. I don't know their motivation, right? LinkedIn has got, I don't even know how many billions of users, right? So it's become this just plethora of people that it's hard to navigate through. Whereas at least something like the MSL Society, there's a natural connection there. You're a part of the MSL community. So whether someone becomes a member of the MSL Society and uses that resource or not, or if you're just going to stay on LinkedIn, regardless, in either scenario, I would tell you, make sure it is very, very focused and niche on what you're trying to do.
Good. Thank you so much for saying that. That's very clear. That's very clear and very useful. One of the things, excuse me, that you've said is the therapeutic area. Narrow it down, make sure it's the same as your expertise. But in another situation that I also discovered that is very challenging is the territory. So if somebody is in Southwest and they're trying to apply to a Northeast role, what are the chances of that? Is that it seems that there's a little bit hesitation to give people option to relocate and things like that. What's your comment on that?
Yeah. So I think to clarify, if your question is, because I think there's a couple things that we have to explore here. All right. If the question is around, should I apply or can I apply if I see a job based in the Midwestern region in Chicago, right? And I live in Miami, I think there's a couple of questions here. One, on one hand, is should I or can I apply? And then there's another that, will I likely get a relocation, right? So I think there's a couple of things. Let's tackle the first one. Should I, can I? Yes, absolutely you can and should if you align and match to that role, right? So I would tell you applying for roles outside of your current region certainly opens you up to additional opportunities. But I would tell that manager, and certainly maybe in a discussion, necessarily wouldn't put it on a resume, and I certainly wouldn't put it in a cover letter. But in a discussion that you're willing to relocate, I would also mention that if in a discussion that you're ready to and able to adapt to a new market and a new region and including understanding local KOL dynamics, but also demonstrating certainly flexibility and expressing your enthusiasm for joining and being a part of that. I think all of those things are possibility. The other piece to this is the question of, would you get a relocation as an aspiring MSL, right? So in other words, as a hiring manager, right? If I'm looking at you and you're based in well, I live in Miami, so you're gonna move to Miami, but you don't live in the region. So the question is, would a hiring manager offer you a relocation to that role or for that role? The chances are basically zero. Never going to happen. It's not going to happen. Now, that seems contrarian to what I just said previously. It's not. So now what it means is you are going to have to pay for your relocation. And here's the thing. We have, through our training programs, we've had numerous aspiring MSLs over the years apply, match very well, get offered jobs in a different region where they're currently living or from, and relocate on their own. And the one thing that I always say to people is breaking into your first MSL role is exceedingly difficult. And I say this, your entire objective in life in trying to break into your first MSL role is get your first role, right? Land your first role. And so I don't know, if you see a job in Sitka, Alaska, right? And you're in Miami, your only response is, I love polar bears. I'd always like to live by polar bears. Can't wait to see them, right? You run to your first role. You're not getting multiple offers, right? So wherever that job is, if you find a job, you run to it. Here's one more thing here that it just popped in my head, as it tends to happen when we're having these discussions. I'm going to think about things that are relevant that I may not have immediately thought of, but popped in my head. This question of, what's the best company type to work for as a brand new MSL? Is that large pharma? Is that medium pharma, small pharma, medical device, contract MSL, so on and so forth? The answer, clearly 100%, not even a question, the best company type to work for as a brand new MSL, as an aspiring MSL, is the company that will hire you, right? You run to your first MSL role. And so I just want, give you some context there for all of that. But these things are really, really important to keep in mind.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much for saying that. It's very clear. During the interview, we've just said that there are different stages of the interview, the phone interview, the screening, and also the in-person at the end of the day. What are the qualities? What are the attributes that you're looking out for when you're engaging aspirant MSL at that stage? And at what point would you say, well, I think I want to consider this candidate, at that point you just know that you're not going to hire this candidate?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different things. One, again, it's a communication role. So somebody that has impeccable communication skills. The other thing that we talk about with a MSL, aspiring MSL, that absolutely, in fact, we did a survey on this as well. I asked 185 managers, what is one of the most important characteristics, and how important is one in particular characteristic when interviewing aspiring and experienced MSLs. And that characteristic came back 98%, being coachable. So demonstrating that coachable. A couple other characteristics, certainly humility. One of the things that we look for and screen out is arrogance. And I say to anybody, especially people in medical affairs, the rest of your career, never, ever lose humility. And so when we think about those, the other thing is, I think that some other characteristics is obviously beyond your scientific aptitude and the ability to communicate science, that kind of thing. Also, some other characteristics we think about is being authentic, right? Being authentic. And so those are some things. Now, another one that may not be readily obvious, that you know, from an aspiring MSL viewpoint, I asked again that same survey, 185 managers, what were the most common reasons that would make you reject an aspiring MSL during an interview? Okay. Some of the top three, right? Poor communication skills, right? About 63% said that. Being unprepared, okay, another 56%, and 56% unpolished communication, right? So being smooth and rehearsed, right, during an interview. But the one that most people don't think of, that all hiring managers are screening for, and you would think that this cannot be that important, and it is critically important, is demonstrating enthusiasm for the role, the company, the product, the disease state. But that must be authentic, right? You can't just go and be like, oh, I'm so excited, right? I mean, you know, it has to be demonstrating enthusiasm and being authentic. Everybody likes being around people who are enthusiastic, right? I mean, I don't know, like I try to think of some weird craft or some obscure sport, or, you know, I think, you know, like a lot of people, when I see somebody who has dedicated their life, or someone who's really good at something that I have no interest in at all, I can't help but to revere that person, right? And admire that. And so that becomes really, really important.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. One thing I quickly want to ask, with all the stories that you've heard about aspiring MSL, which one is the most annoying or discouraging story that you've heard, or you've experienced, or somebody else experienced that you've heard before?
Yeah. You know, yeah, I've got a great one, actually. So in the previous role, I was managing all the MSLs for a company living in Montreal, Canada. So I managed all the MSLs across Canada and the US. And I was in the interview, and I was with somebody who had, I think he had 7-8 years of MSL experience. This was not an aspiring MSL. And during the interview, it was very, very uncomfortable and awkward, just having a conversation. And I was stunned at it, because I kept thinking to myself, couldn't help thinking that, how is it that this person has made it this far, right? What annoyed me and what was really uncomfortable is it was almost, there was a sense of ego about the person. And during a couple of questions, really basic questions, right? Really basic questions of like things like, I don't know, go back to the Parkinson's, because I don't want to reveal who this was in the therapeutic area, but, you know, just use the Parkinson's as an example. So I'll use that as opposed to the real one. But, you know, the question really was around, tell me about a challenging time that you had with a KOL that the engagement didn't go as planned, and, you know, what did you do? And I remember the person, and I was so annoyed. I got off the phone, told my wife. She could hear it in the other room when I was interviewing this person, and I was so annoyed. And the person was like, there was this weird, awkward, long pause that felt like 10 minutes, just silence. And I finally was like, "Are you there? Do you need me to repeat the question?" And he said to me, Tolu, he said, Can we come back to that? Let me come back. I'm not feeling comfortable answering that. I was stunned at that, right? And I'm like, this is a really basic one. And it happened a couple of times. And so when he got on the call with me, I guess I forgot to mention, what really set this up, when he got on the call with me, he gave me the attitude of, why am I going through this process? I've got 8 years of MSL experience. You basically should have hired me already. And this is exactly why that person did not get hired. And he actually didn't go forward beyond me. That was it. We rejected his application. So that was, for sure, one of the most annoying.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I hope our viewers are learning from that. Then on the other side, which one is the most inspiring aspiring MSL story you've heard before?
We have so many. One of the most rewarding aspects of leading the MSL Society is helping aspiring MSLs break into their first role. We've been fortunate that we've now done, I think you mentioned in my bio, hundreds of these. And in fact, on the website, we actually have a page that has, I don't even know how many people are on there, about 150 that have been through our training programs. And it's awesome. And some of these individuals have really struggled. I have lots of them, but I'll give you one that comes to mind. So this was a woman that was kind of mid-career, was in academia for a long time, and she came to our 3-day MSL presentation and communication skills training. So we do this as you probably know, we do this very, very intense 3-day MSL presentation and interview skills training program. And what's cool about that program is it's a limit of 8 people. And during the program, all of the participants interview live with 2 different current MSL managers, right? So it's really kind of, real world, you're going to get the real experience. And she came in and was just awful, like awful at presenting, awful at communicating. The clothing that she wore screamed academia, definitely not professional, not certainly appropriate for an MSL, so on and so forth. So not only the way her brand, the way that she presented herself from clothing and that kind of thing, and her hair was a mess. I mean, it was just the whole thing. But also the way that she communicated screamed academia. These mannerisms of sort of belittling people when she was presenting. It felt very much like a lecture, so on and so forth. Right? So very typical stuff. And look, Jolu, if I had $1 for every time someone told me they're good at presenting, I'd be a wealthy man because they think that this is some lecture, right? So, we give them a little bit of humility when they go into that training. In any case, she struggled for a long time. And I will tell you, after 3 days, there was, as very typical always does, there was a dramatic shift in everything, dramatic difference between day 1 and day 3. Now, what's interesting about that training is also all participants are up in front of the room a lot. What does a lot mean? You're going to get 15 plus videos at the end of 3 days, and everything is video recorded. And the thing is about video, it doesn't lie, right? So we hear people like, oh, I would never do that in a presentation. Really? Let me push play because the video says otherwise, right? So she made this transition, and what ended up happening was I continued to work with her. She continued to get resources and coaching. 2 years it took her, but that was 2014. What does she do today and has been for years? Not only did she become an MSL, she is now an MSL manager. So It's one of my favorite stories, and she was awesome. Humility, took it all on, and did what she had to do. So that's probably one of my favorite stories.
Good. That was really good. Thank you for sharing that. That's really good. One of the things, I know we are running out of time. We're going to wrap up very soon.
Hey, we could spend 5 more hours. I don't mind.
As hiring manager, one of the things that I've experienced, and you probably have experienced, is when people apply on the other side, they tend to have interview with somebody and they didn't get a job, for example, and they want to apply the second time. And you, as hiring manager that you were in the past, what are the conditions that will make you want to hear the same candidate the second time, even though they didn't get a job the first time?
Yeah. Look, I would say that the odds of that happening are very low. I mean, it's just, it's very low. And I think it's really important that you kind of think about, really think about what would those conditions be, right? And in fact, I cannot even think of a time that it's ever happened. Why is that? It's less to do with that applicant and more to do with the competitiveness of those roles, right? There are so many people applying for each vacant role that the chances of coming back are low, right? And so I think that, again, I think the odds of that happening are low. But what would, hypothetically, what would I be looking for? Some sort of demonstrated growth and improvement from the last time, right? So somehow showing tangible growth from the last interview, such as, I don't know, some new skills or certifications or relevant work that further emphasizes your expertise in that therapeutic area. I think demonstrating certainly continuous learning and addressing any things that we've talked about in the previous interview. So you as an applicant would have to pick up on that, right? And talk about those things that you've done. And I think demonstrating that professional growth and area of self-improvement, I think certainly would be something that I would admire. But again, I think in general, applicants realistically should not plan on that happening. I think the odds are very close to zero.
Wow, thank you for saying that. That's another strategy to apply. That means that you have to look in another direction. Because
Yep. And look, and it's a really good thing if I can just interject here. I apply for a role, and let's say that I had a phone screen and then a phone interview, and it's my dream job. It's a target company. I mean, I know I am going to be the single greatest MSL at that company. I love it. They're going to love me. And I don't get the job. It is time to quickly, very, very quickly pivot and move on. Don't be doing a bunch of what ifing, right? Because that'll just eat you alive. And so that's what I would tell to anybody listening to this: move on quickly.
Wow. Just get up from that fight and try to look for other opportunities. One of the things that you said today that stuck with me is humility and being coachable and also to learn. And you demonstrated that by going back to get your MD. You also, it's also in your CV that you get a leadership certificate at Harvard and things like that. So in your own opinion, how important is that kind of being able to learn, and what made you make that decision for yourself along the way?
Yeah, look, I think that, it's critical that you demonstrate, this whole idea of learning. And why is that? It's the job. right? The job that I hire you for today, I guarantee you will not be the same job 6 months from now. Why is that? The product's going to go through its life cycle. The product is going to evolve. And so there's going to be new studies, there's going to be new data. And so that is the job. So continuous learning and self-improvement and development is critical to your success as an MSL engaging with KOLs. And so it's critical that you do that for self-improvement as well. And the role is continually evolving as well. And so marrying those two and being able to be self-disciplined is certainly going to impact and be critical to your long-term success.
Wow, excellent. We're still talking about breaking into first MSL role, and this is the book by Dr. Samuel Dyer. You can find this on Amazon and anywhere. And there's a new edition that is out. You can see it at the background. If you look at the background of my guest there, it's there. As we wrap up the session, is there any last minute advice you want to give to aspiring MSL as we close?
Yeah, look, again, as I said a few times, breaking an MSL role, it's difficult. But, the one thing that I would tell people who are listening is as you research and if you discover the MSL role and profession aligns with your own career ambitions and you feel like it's a match, put your head down and go to work. You're going to have a lot of obstacles that you're going to face. Go through them, around them, under them, over them. You're going to get maybe 1,000 no's. You need one yes. And until you get that, you keep going. Don't ever give up. And, I will say, I always like to give this because it's so meaningful for me. There's a quote that has inspired me for more than 25 years. It is literally sitting here in the office with me. I had it printed in my PhD dissertation. I had it printed in my master's thesis. And it is printed on the first page in both editions of my book. And I hope that you find inspiration with it as well. And it's this: the difference between successful people and others is not a lack of skill, not a lack of knowledge, but merely a lack of will. So if you want it, go get it.
Wow, thank you. If you want it, go get it. Go and get a book. Break into first MSL. I think educating yourself is the first way to start. That's where I started. I'm going to keep reading and keep learning. That's what I'm recommending everybody to do. At this point, we want to wrap up our session. Thank you for being here, Dr. Samuel Dyer. It's been a very entertaining learning session for me, and also I hope for our viewers. If you missed this, the recording is going to be on all the platforms that is available, social media. You can go back, and don't forget to get a book, start educating yourself, and get involved with Medical Science Liaison Society so you can get more training. Thank you for being here, Dr. Samuel Dyer. Really appreciate your time and your knowledge on this.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I hope it was valuable for everybody listening. And certainly, as Tolu said, if I can help in any way, reach out to me. Happy to help. But I wish all of you who are listening and who are aspiring to the MSL profession the very, very best of luck.
Good. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.